Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 221001 A Plus Study Group pre-show. We are doing a pre-show for about 10 minutes. Going to get everything going. Let's let the chat room know that the A Plus Study Group, actually the 221001 A Plus Study Group live stream is located here. If you are watching this over on the YouTube and you are live here on May the 7th at noon Eastern Time, then you should absolutely join us at professormesser.com/live because we will be live chatting there. There's no live chat over on the YouTube side. Let's get this up and running. I've got a couple of things to look at on this side. This all looks fine. Scroll up, scroll up, scroll up, scroll down. All of this is looking good. Let's also check, let's check a few things before we get this going. This is going to be our presentation, so let's make sure that's live. Let's do a quick camera check. Camera 1, we'll just cut over to camera 1. Camera 2, camera 3 is what's in front of me, although what really should happen is it should be this. There we go. And camera 4, can I put myself on camera 4? I can indeed. And then if we want to go back to this, a lot of buttons to push these days. A few more buttons than we used to have. That's okay. It's all good. It all works. Let's see if we can get rid of backgrounds there. Okay. We've already done the audio for the podcast. That was recorded before we went live, so those intros are all finished. We are recording down here. We are recording on the streamer, which is here. The camera angle makes it look like that's sitting at a weird twisted rate. That's really straight up on my world. And everything else is going. And the stream appears to be working. Always the biggest concern. You set up for a stream. It's nice if the stream is actually there. Hi, chat room. Thanks for being here. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. We've got all A plus 221001 today. So if you're joining the live stream, we'll get started at the top of the hour. If you're watching this on the replay, you can fast forward about 8 minutes and you'll be at the top of the live stream. We've got all 221001 questions today. So we're not doing 1002 questions. We're doing 1001. But we've got another live stream in 2 days. That's all 1002 questions. See, you got options. You got places you can go. You got things you can choose from. It's good to have options. We've got messages that will go out shortly to Facebook. Your emails will go out in a couple of minutes. So people will start seeing those and they'll show up as well. This is just a pre-show. Some folks have sent me notes saying, I watched a replay and it's just you sitting there, us looking at the back of your head. Like, no, that's not the show. That would be the worst show ever. Maybe not ever, but pretty bad. No, at the top of the hour, we will go live. You'll see this part, unfortunately. We'll go live. You'll have to see the front of me when we do that. And it'll be in about 7 minutes, so it won't be long. But I like to get things up and running. I like to check the live stream, make sure everything's working properly, make sure I haven't forgotten anything, make sure the cameras are working. Could I do all of that without you being here? I guess so. Technically, yes. Technically, I could push a button and we would launch right into it. You'd see a title screen and we'd just go. But what fun is that? This way I get to chat with talk to the chat room a little bit, get to discuss whatever's going on in their world. We get to find out if things are okay. Sometimes the chat room will tell me, wait a second, you haven't actually turned on the microphone. Things like that happen. So this time the microphone is indeed on. That's good. Hello, West Tennessee. Now, I don't know if by West Tennessee, if you mean the western part of the state of Tennessee, or if you mean West Tennessee Street here in Tallahassee. So that's the challenge. When I hear West Tennessee, I think, oh, well, that's over by campus. That's where I used to hang out, go to college. Italy is here. Of course you are. Welcome, Italy. That's nice. I am not very fluent in my Italian, so you'll have to make do, I'm afraid. There's our 5-minute mark. Alarms have gone off. Things have beeped here. So I know that you're here. Ohio is here. Welcome, Ohio. It's been a while since I've been to Dublin, but I have indeed been there. West Virginia is here. Welcome. First time here. How'd that happen? This will be a good, fun live stream, though. Make sure for those of you joining that you check the link at professormesser.com/live. All of your links that you'll need will be there. All the phone numbers you need will be there if you want to call in. All of the links to answer questions live will be there. These are the things you can do when you are here on the live stream that you can't do on the replay, I'm afraid. But you can still follow along on the replay. That's okay. You just can't add your vote into the list of things. We'll get to that in just a moment, too. I've got a number of you adding the vote. Let's go ahead and put this up so you can actually see it over my shoulder of who's answering what. We'll do that. There you go. So you've got that view in the world. See, I'm looking at the chat here. This is what you will see on camera 3. This is what you see on camera 4. You obviously are seeing me. You can't really see the camera. I guess you can see the lens here at the top of this. That's the camera that will be the face cam, the head cam, as we call it. You're looking at the bird cam right now, which is not the bird cam outside, but I call it bird cam because it's up there a little bit higher, like a birdie. We are recording, just checking recordings. I'm streaming here with OBS. I have a separate streaming server these days that does that. That's how you're able to get 1080p on the stream, which is kind of nice. No more 720p. And it is running in a different room. I'm just pulling the video back to here so I can monitor it. There's not much to monitor on that. It just runs. It just goes. So that helps as well. Puerto Rico. Hola, ¿cómo está? Thank you for being here. Haven't been down to Puerto Rico in a while either. I've been down to Caguas. I've not been down to those areas. From the other side, welcome, David. You're our first Supernatural attendee. Welcome. Maybe not the first I'm aware of, because certainly there have been other Supernatural attendees, of course. Myanmar, welcome. Wow, that's nice. The Q&A, you can find all your links that you'll need at professormesser.com/live. Will this be the same as the 901, 902? It will not. A lot of this content will overlap, obviously, but these study groups going forward will all be based on the 1001, 1002 exam objectives, so you could very well get newer exam objectives than what you will see. You do, however, have 3 years worth, 3.5 years worth of A+ study groups you can go back through that are specific to the 901, 902. So there's the option there for you. So sorry that we kind of moved over to the 1000 series as soon as the 1000 series were public. And that's sort of how we're going to go going forward. And as we go through this, I guess we can sort of mention, this question is specific to both. This question would be only for the 1000 series. There are a couple of those in there like that. How are we doing on time? Got a couple minutes? I really need to set this up so I can see a clock. Got a minute and a half. Minute and a half, we'll get started, everybody. So we'll get there. Going to take Core 1 by the end of the month. Fantastic. Obviously, all my Core 1 videos are up and available on the website. I think most of them have all of the closed captioning done on them as well. So those should be ready to go. The 901, 902 have not gone away yet. That's your problem, isn't it? That's the challenge most of us have, is that both the 901, 902 and the 1001, 1002 are both available right now. We'll talk about the retirement dates and everything related to the 900 series here in just a few minutes once we get started. I'll do a quick overview so you know what we're talking about, why we're talking about it, what dates you need to be aware of, and if you're planning to do any exams, which ones should you be doing? Talk about that. So, any vacation plans this summer? Oh, yes. There's plenty going on this summer. We have to go see family in Canada. That's our big summer trip. That's happening soon. So we'll go do, plus there are other things happening this summer. There's a lot happening this summer. This is a controlled chaos that we have here at Messer Studios. So that's how it works. Don't worry, you won't miss any content. I am shifting things up. We'll talk about that a little bit. Next month will be a little bit different with the timing, but not much. You'll get a chance to see all of that here. Let's we got about 5 seconds before we get started. I think the important part is that we do that part where we actually do get started. So here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the May 2019 A-plus study group, specifically the 220-1001 A-plus study group from Messer Studios. Thanks for joining us. My name is James Messer. I will be your host for this next hour of live, real, online Q&A for the 220-1001 A-plus exam objectives. I've got plenty of questions for you today. We'll step through all of them. We'll see how you do. You get to vote on your answer you think is correct live and online, so stick around for that. I'll show you exactly how we go through that part. We've also got a lot to go through with the changes that have been taking place with the exam, so we'll go through those things too. And in the next hour, we'll stop the Q&A part, at least the interactive Q&A part. I'll open up phone lines. I'll take questions from the chat room, and we'll do that until you're just tired of listening to me. I'm not sure that's really the best barometer, but that's what we're going to do. We've got plenty that we'll go through specifically today for the 220-1001. I do another one of these study groups 2 days from now on Thursday, same time, same place. That is for the 220-1002. Of course, you can get my daily pop quiz question at professormesser.com/Twitter. Of course, all my videos are available. The 220-1001 videos are all posted and available for you to watch. Every minute of every video is available online for you to see. No registration, no paywall, no special things you have to do. You simply go to professormesser.com/YouTube or just choose the links on my website for the 220-1001 course, and you'll be able to watch all those. You can also go right to the video index at professormesser.com/1000 videos. 1000 videos is that link, professormesser.com/1000 videos. Plenty to see there as well. You will get, if you listen in for this first hour, sometime during this first hour, I will give you instructions how you can earn a 1 hour CEU from me. Technically, you earn the 1 hour just for being here. Most places that take CEUs take your word for it. But there is a process where you can send me a special note, and I will send you back a digitally signed email that certifies that you must have been here because you knew the special secret code word that I give out sometime during this first hour. So listen into that. If you're someone who collects CEUs, not everyone is doing this these days. People are doing other things to renew their certifications. But if you are, more than happy to give those CEUs to you. Just listen out for this first hour. We've got all of these exam objectives that we're going through today that will be specific to the 220-1001. And for those of you that are familiar with the A-plus exam, for the last 3.5 years or so, the exams that you take have been the 901 or the 902. I guess that's sort of the colloquial phrase. It's really the 220-901 and the 220-902. Those were released on December 15th, 2015. Those exams will retire on July 31st, 2019. That's a pretty important date. If you were to start studying right now, this is May the 7th. If you were to start studying right now, that would be a very aggressive schedule for taking both of those exams, because you have to take both the 901 exam and pass it and the 902 exam and pass it. And you can't combine this with any newer exams. That's the two that you would be locked into. So if you're someone who's watching this and you're wondering, should I start with the 900 series exams and try to get those done before July? I would not recommend it. On average, it's probably about a 3-month per exam to study for this. So in the best casual possible world of studies, probably 6 months of study to earn the certification. Some people do it much shorter. Some people take longer. I'm sort of the 1 year person. I take a year to take these exams. So when you think about this, I would not recommend right now that anybody start studying with the 900 series exams. You instead need to start studying with the latest version of the exams, which is the 220-1001 and 220-1002. This is what you want to be able to do. So think about how you want to study for these exams, because these series of exams came out in January. These haven't been around very long. It's the newest exams. They have all the latest content, and they're going to be around for at least 3 years, probably a little bit more. So that gives you plenty of ramp, plenty of time to study for both of these exams. The exams themselves are graded exactly the same as the grades for the 900 series. So for the 1001 exam, you need to earn a 675 on a scale of 900. It's really a scale from 100 to 900. And for the 1002, you need to earn a 700. So nothing's new there. The content is new. If you were to look at the exam objectives for both the 900 series and the 1000 series, there is about 21% of topics that are brand new on the 1001 and 23% that are brand new on the 1002. So some advantages and disadvantages there. The advantage is that not a huge number of topics are changed. Only, quote, 20% have changed. That's pretty reasonable. So if you have been studying for the 900 series and you're thinking maybe I should shift gears, you probably would not lose much traction there because only 20% of the content is brand new. Now, one thing that is important to know, though, 20% is a pretty big number. In fact, it's a pretty big number when you're taking the exam. So you would not want to study from 900 series content and go in and take the 1000 series exams. Don't do that. That is not what you want to do. You instead want to make sure that the materials you study from match the version of the exam that you're going to take. What we're going to talk about today is all about the 220 1001. So when you think about that, if you're someone who's taking the 900 series exams, I have more than 3 years of study groups you can go back to and replay all of them, and they're very specific to the 900 series. So you may want to consider doing that as you're, of course, going through these here today. Both the 1001 and 1002 are very similar in topic to the 900 series. So they look almost identical. There's not much that's different. A lot of people think there are dramatic changes. There are no dramatic changes on this exam. It will be very similar. A lot of the content that you will see in my 1000 series, very similar to the content from the 900. Some of it's been updated, some of it's been tweaked. What they've really done is kind of slipstream all of the changes that have happened over the last 3 years or so. So not a huge difference in those two. Just keep that in mind as you're beginning your studies. I, of course, have my 1000 series course available for you to watch right now. And there is also a downloadable version. If you're someone who needs a version of this course that is not online, you can find that at professormesser.com/download1001, which is HD video, MP3 audio from that. If you want to put it on a mobile device and listen in your car, maybe while you're working out. My course notes come with this. There is an option there for a full digital download of this particular course. You can find out more about that at professormesser.com/download1001. Of course, the entire course is free to watch if you are online, so you've got the option. You can do either one of those. This study group is available in a podcast form. If you have a podcast app you like to use, you can add it to the list. Everything you need to know about listening in immediately or adding it to your podcast catching program, you can find at professormesser.com/podcast, and you'll find links there for the A+, the Network Plus, and the Security Plus study groups as well. Again, completely free content, nothing you have to buy, nothing you have to do, all available for you at professormesser.com/podcast. If you show up tomorrow or so, usually this takes a day or two, there is a full index of every study group we ever do. So some people want to find a particular question or they want to jump to a particular Q&A that we did in the second hour. It's fully documented. My marketing manager, Lori, goes through every minute of what we do, and she timestamps the entire thing. These are in the YouTube the text, the video text that's under the video description page. So that video description content, you simply click on the timestamp, takes you right to the question, right to the answer, right to what you're looking for. So it's a nice thing that's available there. If someone's trying to find something, that may be a very good way to help you out to find those things. Today, we're going to do Q&A. And here is how you do it. You go to professormesser.com/QA. There is a page there that will show up with a question on it right now. So just open up a new browser window and you can do that. There is also an app that you can download. This is the Socrative student app. The Socrative student app. And you can, of course, download that. It will ask you for a room name. The room name is Professor Messer. ProfessorMesser. So that's one of those things you can do as well. Find all of those things at professormesser.com/QA. I will let Lori know, because she is watching this, obviously, to do this, that Jack in the chat room is saying those timestamps are very, very convenient. I have to agree, Jack. They are very convenient. It's a nice thing to have there. So go to professormesser.com/QA, and right now there's a question waiting for you. It's our first question of the day. It's actually a question from last month. Let's see how you do with this question that asks, which of these RAID types is the most efficient with disk space while also providing data redundancy? Which of these RAID types is the most efficient with disk space while also providing data redundancy. And what you're going to have is some options available on the screen. You will have RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 5, or RAID 1 plus 0. These are all RAID types, by the way, you have to know for your A+ certification. That's useful. And you can see in real time, we're watching people answer these as we go. 59% of you have said RAID 5, 18% have said RAID 1 plus 0, 16% have said RAID 1, and 6% have said RAID 0. So we know there's a few things in this question we have to break down because it's asking for two different things. It's a RAID type. We need to provide data redundancy, and we have to be efficient with disk space. Now, we know that RAID 0 provides 0 data redundancy. That's easy to remember. So we know it's not going to be RAID 0. So the 5 of you that answered RAID 0, unfortunately, not the right answer. The other challenge we have, of course, is that RAID 1, RAID 5, and RAID 1 plus 0 provide data redundancy. So let's shift to disk space. We need to be efficient, which means we're using the least amount of disk space while also being redundant. We know that RAID 1 makes an exact copy of everything that we're doing. So that's a challenge. That's a lot of disk space. We're doubling the amount of drive space we have to have. RAID 1 plus 0 has a completely redundant set of drives that restore the hashed information. So there's redundancy associated with some of that is inefficient. The most efficient is RAID 5. 63% of you did say RAID 5. There's really no question there associated with that. Of course, it's RAID 5, which is striping with parity. That's how we're going to be able to have this RAID breakdown of what's there. So we have file blocks. They're striped together. There's a parity block that is intermixed in there. If you lose a drive, you simply rebuild the content based on the parity. So it's a very efficient use of the drive space, and you get the redundancy built into it as well. That is the correct answer. That is what you want to do to be able to figure out which one of these would be the right thing. And indeed, 63% of you did indeed say RAID 5. So at this point, looks like most of you are in here. You're able to answer the questions. As we go through the live questions, remember, no hints in the chat room, no answering in the chat room. To answer anything, you want to go to professormesser.com/QA. And with that, let's do some questions. As some of you may realize, the A+ exams are not all multiple choice, or maybe you don't realize that. A lot of people have told me, I got to this exam, and these first set of questions were not multiple choice. That's right, they're not. The first set of questions, usually a handful of questions, 5 or so, plus or minus questions, will be anything but multiple choice. They might be fill in the blank. They might be matching questions. They might be questions that have you put things in a particular order from fastest to slowest or highest to lowest. It just depends on what they'll be asking of you. So the first question I always have for my study groups is a performance-based question. You can go back over those number of years, and there's a performance-based question waiting for you. The question today is a matching question. And the challenge with this matching question is I want to match 5 things, except I have more than 5 answers. This is what you run into on these exams, isn't it? Is that you have to match things together, but they give you more things than you would need to match with. That's a little bit of a challenge. Here are the 5 things that we're going to be looking for today. We're going to be matching network protocols to their function. So the first protocol is AFP. The second is SMTP. The third is SNMP. The fourth is Telnet. And the fifth is DHCP. The description of these protocols, the one that tells you how the function is, the first is it connects to a remote command line. The second is that it encrypts a terminal connection, log into a VPN connection, transfer files between macOS devices, send email messages from a mobile device, gather statistics from network devices, automatically assign IP addresses, and share a desktop from a remote location. So we've got 5, 6, 7, 8 different functions there we have to figure out. So make sure as you step through this, you know what these network protocols are and what these functions are, but not all functions that we have listed on the right side will be used. It's a 1-to-1. So you're going to have 3 of these left over at the end for all of these. So for those of you listening on the podcast, let me step through the protocols and then I'll step through the description of their function. So the protocols are AFP, SMTP, SNMP, Telnet, and DHCP. Those are your 5 protocols. And here are the functions. Connect to a remote command line, encrypt a terminal connection, log into a VPN connection, transfer files between macOS devices, send email messages from a remote device, gather statistics from network devices, automatically assign IP addresses, and share a desktop from a remote location. So hopefully you can mix and match these. If you think they're in the right order now, you can simply put into the view 1A, 2B, 3C, 4D, and 5E, and you're done. So there's the one who that's not the answer, by the way. They are not quite that straightforward. One of these days we're going to do this and talk about how that works, but that is not how it works now. I'm seeing some questions come in at professormesser.com/QA. That's where you want to put those answers in. Some of you are being very honest and just simply saying, I have no idea. So this will be a great opportunity for you to learn about these protocols as we step through the answers. So stay tuned for just a moment, and we will absolutely step through each one of these to figure out all the details. This is a good group. If I look at these, all right, I'm doing the answers myself right now, and I'm looking at your answers coming in. You're doing very good with this. You're doing very, very good with this, as a matter of fact. I think I'm looking at the particular answers that we have listed here, and I think we're doing pretty good. I think we're doing pretty good with these answers. They're definitely a one-to-one when you look through this. So hopefully that will be something you know as you go through this. There's a lot of protocols. This is just a sample of these protocols from the exam objectives, by the way. I only grabbed 5 of them. There are probably 5 or 6 more. The entire list of protocols you need to know is listed in the exam objectives. So if you don't have the exam objectives, go to professormesser.com/objectives, get those objectives. You will be very, very good shape if you know that. So let's see how we're doing with these as we step through them. Let's go through each one of these particular protocols and see what they do. We'll start it with the very first one, AFP. This is the Apple Filing Protocol. That kind of gives it away if you happen to know that name, that it's the Apple Filing Protocol, because that will transfer files between macOS devices. So if you answer D, that is the one that the Apple Filing Protocol does do. That's exactly what it's designed to do. Each operating system has its own special way of transferring files between devices sharing that same operating system. So you will certainly see tons of macOS devices as you go out into the world. They are interspersed everywhere in corporate America. So that's an important thing to know about. The second is SMTP, the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. Again, that gives away a little bit. If you happen to know that it's the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, then that would obviously be E, send email messages from a mobile device. That is the protocol these mobile devices are using to communicate to a mail server very often, is SMTP. There are people that are running things like Outlook on their mobile device. In those particular cases, you're probably using Microsoft's Outlook protocols to be able to do that. But if you're communicating using an ISP, you're using Gmail, you're using some of these other cloud-based services, then SMTP would certainly be the one there. Third on our list, SNMP. It sounds so similar to SMTP. Sometimes it's hard to remember that that is the Simple Network Management Protocol. So that's the one you would want to know. And obviously that is used to gather statistics from routers, from switches, from firewalls, from servers, from anything connected to the network. Almost everything connected to the network has the ability to send us statistics using the SNMP, Simple Network Management Protocol. They're redundant. The protocol of SNMP. If you're doing anything with network management, you're doing monitoring of your systems, you'll be using SNMP a lot. It is crucial. The fourth on our list is Telnet. Telnet allows us to connect to a remote command line. Telnet allows us to connect over the network in a non-encrypted form to a device that can give us a command line. Telnet is probably not what you will be using, I don't know, ever. Telnet's not very commonly used these days. If you happen to have a device that is really, really, really old, that has a command line, you could possibly be using Telnet to do that. You will use Telnet to do other things that may not have anything to do with grabbing a remote command line. Telnet's a great way to see if a device is working. There's certain things that you could do. If you want to see if a web server is working, you can Telnet to port 80 of the web server and pretend that you are a web client. Plenty of videos that can show you how to do that one out there. That's just another thing you can do with Telnet. It's not worthless, but you will not be very commonly connecting to a remote command line with it, although that's what it does. And lastly, DHCP. The Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol is our automatic IP addressing mechanism on our devices. So certainly that is something that we can use to do that. So there were plenty of other protocols that were not listed here, or descriptions of protocols that were not listed here, such as encrypting a terminal connection. Well, that would be Secure Shell or SSH. So option B, if we had SSH in that list, that's what option B would be associated with. Let's see if we can figure out the other one. Log into a VPN connection. Normally, the authentication process of logging in would use some type of third-party database, such as Radius, TACAX+. One of those are very commonly used when you're logging into a VPN connection to provide authentication. Usually, it's authenticating back to a database that's commonly used for authentication. So if you're in Windows environment and you have Active Directory, then your username and password's in that Active Directory database. So it's very common to have VPN concentrators access Active Directory over LDAP. It's a very good way to do it. Not just Radius and TACAX+. It could use LDAP to query that database and see if your username and password is correct. So very common to do that as well. So that one, logging into a VPN connection, could have been Radius. It could have been TACAX+. It could have been LDAP and many others, by the way. There's lots of other ways to authenticate. Those are three of the very common ways. And last one, sharing a desktop from a remote location. RDP, the Remote Desktop Protocol, is what's commonly used to do that. We didn't have RDP in our list, so we weren't able to use that one either. So something that you can see. Lots of protocols here, and folks in the chat room are saying, is this protocol exclusive to Windows? Is that protocol exclusive to Windows? These are protocols. So one of the beautiful things of a protocol is that many different operating systems are able to communicate to each other using these very common, well-known, and standardized protocols. So protocols such as SMTP, SNMP, Telnet, DHCP is used in Windows. It's used in Linux. It's used in Mac OS. It's used in many, many, many other operating systems as well. So there's no exclusivity with any of these apps. Even AFP, you might have a third-party product running Linux. For instance, I have a Linux file system that is a RAID array in my data center, which is a closet that's in the back of the room. My data center has this enormous RAID array with terabytes of drive space. I communicate to that device using AFP, but that device itself is running Linux. So it's a good example of how all of these protocols are used across many different operating systems. And again, if you weren't aware of any of these, or you want to know more about other protocols that are there, they're all in the exam objectives. The certification exam does not care so much that you know what the names mean, that you know what the acronyms are associated with. The exam doesn't care so much that you know that SMTP is the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. What it really wants to know is, how do you use that? What other things use that? Is there an application that uses that? What's it used for? That will be a much more important thing for you to know in the exam. So don't spend a lot of time memorizing abbreviations. In fact, in the industry, we sometimes even forget what the abbreviations mean. We're setting up our SNMP management server, and somebody might ask, what's SNMP? And we're thinking, SNMP, what was SNMP again? We call it SNMP so much, we even forget what SNMP is. So knowing that it's the Simple Network Management Protocol does help, but in reality, it's more important that you know how it's used. So there's your performance-based question of the month. Hopefully that's one that's given you some ideas and some thoughts about using protocols on your network. Let's do another question. We'll get into this one. Here's a question from the 221,001 exam, and it asks, I'll click the button on my side so I can view it as well along with you. The display on a laptop has unexpectedly turned off. When examining the screen with a flashlight, there's a faint image that's still visible. Which of these is the most likely explanation of this issue? Let's see if we happen to know what that is. Is it that the backlight is faulty? Is it that the video drivers are corrupted? Is it that the operating system has crashed? Is it that the LCD display is faulty? Or is it that the video ribbon cable is disconnected? All things that can happen on a laptop, but really only one of these is the most likely explanation of this issue. Let's talk about this issue again, which is the display on a laptop has unexpectedly turned off. When examining the screen with a flashlight, there's a faint image that's still visible. So let's see what you know about this particular one and how it works, how all of these things work together. This would be a good one to know about. This is see how well you know about working with LCD displays. This is a question, by the way, as well as the last question that applies both to the 220.901 as well as the 220.1001. So the 20% overlap has not really hit us yet so far with this. Some people are thinking this was a question from last month. It is not. It's a little different than our question from last month, isn't it? A little bit different than how we're working with this. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. Please no hints in the chat room. Please no questions in the chat room. Please no answers in the chat room. This is one where we want to step through what this happens to be. This is more of a troubleshooting question, and you're going to have a whole section of troubleshooting on the exam that you will have to go through to figure out how this particular problem can be troubleshot and how to figure out what the actual problem might be. You should be able to look at this series of symptoms, put all of the symptoms together with what you're seeing and the evidence that's there, and then come to a determination of what you think your best chance is, what the best possible explanation is of these particular issues. It's an important part of the exam, and there are tons of problems listed in the exam objectives that you have to be able to know how to diagnose. So make sure you do that. Of course, I have a video for every single one of those. The videos go through every single one of those problems that you have to troubleshoot directly from the exam objective, so you'll have those there. Let's see how you did with this one. A display on a laptop is unexpectedly turned off. When examining the screen with a flashlight, there's a faint image that's still visible. Which of these is the most likely explanation of this issue? 77% of you say the backlight is faulty, but 19% of you say the LCD display is faulty. And then it's single digits for everything else. 2% said the video drivers are corrupted. Nobody thinks it's that. 1% said the operating system has crashed. 1% said the video ribbon cable's disconnected. We're really focused on the one that is the 77%, which is the backlight is faulty. Although I like the 18% of you that say it's a bad LCD display. That's where the problem is associated with this. So which one is it really? This is a problem you're going to run into often. This is such a common problem that this process of troubleshooting, when I ran into a problem with one of my televisions, is the first thing the technician did when he walked in the door. And that's because behind the screen of an LCD display, there has to be some kind of backlight. LCD displays don't put off their own light. You have to have, and most people aren't putting the television or the display next to a window to have light shine through it. So you have to have some type of light behind the screen. And so behind your LCD screens is usually these days LEDs. LEDs use very low power. They're very clean. They're very shiny. A lot of white light. You can put them all along the backlight. In fact, some televisions are like this one where there's a whole matrix of LED lights that are behind the television. Some of the latest televisions will even turn on and off, brighten or lower the intensity of the LED depending on what's happening on your screen, which I find is interesting. A lot of older laptops and LCD displays will use fluorescent lamps, specifically CCFLs or cold cathode fluorescent lamps. They use a little bit more higher voltage. In fact, they use AC power. And in fact, since you're providing the laptop with DC power, your laptop has to convert that DC power into AC. And so sometimes you'll run into situations where the inversion of that voltage will suddenly stop working. Your inverters will go out and suddenly your backlights will stop working. But that doesn't mean the display stopped working. That just means the ability to shine light through the display stopped working. From a human perspective, it's the same problem. I can't see the screen. That's a bit of an issue when you run into those when that occurs. Our particular question was asking, examining the screen with a flashlight, there's a faint image that's still visible, which means you could still use Windows, move the mouse around the screen, start applications if you were looking closely enough, and you would still see things happening on the screen. But it would be very difficult to see. That's why if you shine a flashlight, it shines through the screen and reflects back a little bit and allows you to see if there's anything going on that screen. That way you can immediately tell, well, the screen is working, the LCD screen is operating, but for some reason I'm not getting a light to come through. And that's exactly why when I had a technician come to look at my television and swap out all, because I knew that was some type of deeper problem, the first thing I did was look at the screen with a flashlight and made sure that it wasn't a backlight issue, because those are relatively easy to correct. On my television, it lost the logic board completely. So the situation that you'll run into is that the first thing people will do is they'll show up with their flashlight. They'll shine their flashlight at the screen. They'll try to see, oh, what's going on? Can I see anything with that? I don't see anything on the screen. It must not be related to a backlight. So when you run into those, you do want to see what you can do about fixing that. You don't want to be in a situation where your backlight goes out. So hopefully that will be something you can think about on your LCD display. If you did answer the backlight is faulty, you would be correct. 75% of you got that one correct. 20% of you said the LCD display is faulty. If the LCD display was faulty, you would not see anything on the screen. There would not be a faint image that was still visible on the screen. It would just be black, completely black. Now, that doesn't mean that it definitely was the LCD display or it definitely was the backlight, but in this particular question where you can see a little bit of a faint image, probably not your LCD display. And this question did ask which was the most likely explanation of this issue. And the most likely explanation, indeed, is that the backlight is faulty. Let's do another question then. Good job for the 76% of you that got that one right. Let's shift gears a little bit to managing firewalls. And that's another thing you have to know how to do on these exams is manage firewall, not just your personal firewall, but all the other firewalls as well. So this question asks, I'm going to make sure that you can see this question on your Socrative screen, which is asked, a network administrator has configured a firewall rule to deny TCP 3389 traffic. Which of these would be affected by this rule? And I have a set of protocols here for you to choose from. So the question is that a network administrator has configured a firewall rule to deny TCP 3389 traffic. So which of these would be affected by this rule? And the possible answers are HTTPS, AFP, RDP, SMTP, SMB. You got 5 options to choose from. Those for the TCP, denying TCP 3389, would it be HTTPS, AFP, RDP, SMTP, or SMB? If you think you know the answer, go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA. That will be the place to go. Firewalls are a little bit intimidating. Firewalls are many-fangled things. They have so many different bells and whistles and dials and switches that you have to know how to work through. But if you become very, very competent with a firewall, you will be someone who's extremely competent with networks. Firewalls are detailed, intricate, very specific network devices. And on top of that's the layer, of course, of security that is on top of that. These days, firewalls are incredibly complex devices. They used to be very simple in how they worked. These days, firewalls are remarkably complex in what they can do. There are people don't even realize, I think at times, what you're able to do on a modern firewall. It's like nothing you've ever seen, with speeds going through and capabilities that most people don't realize even exist in the world, much less on a firewall. It is remarkable what you will be able to run into with that. So get your answers in. A network administrator has configured a firewall to deny TCP 3389 traffic. Which of these would be affected by this rule? Do you think you know what it is? 78% of you think it's RDP. That's a pretty big number. 10% say that it's SMB. So we have a bit of a conflict there, at least in double-digit conflict. 8% said it's HTTPS, 3% said SMTP, and 0% said AFP. So that's one that you should even think about when working through these. So 77% said RDP is what that type of traffic is. Going through it, TCP 3389. I think some of you have run remote desktop before or set it up on your router, and you probably realize that it uses by default TCP and port number 3389. Very common to use those protocols. In fact, remote desktop, of course, is the protocol used to share your desktop in Windows from one device to another. For instance, I have a remote desktop client on my Mac device. I can remote desktop into my Windows device from this view using RDP, the remote desktop protocol. Very useful to have that there. There are clients, of course, not just for Mac OS, but for almost everything. So you're able to run on your machine and connect to a Windows device running RDP wherever it happens to be anywhere in the world. It becomes very handy to be able to do that. So those of you that did answer C, RDP, the 75% of you were spot on. You knew your protocols, you knew your port numbers, you knew what that was, and you were able to put those together. Pretty important to have those pieces there. 10% said HTTPS. HTTPS uses TCP port 443. That would not be the case. And then you've got AFP, SMTP, and SMB. Hardly anybody thought that it was those protocols either to be able to work through those. As I mentioned, there's a huge list of protocols on the exam you need to know about. The 220-1001 and the 220-1002 are enormous exams. That's why you have to take two entirely separate exams to earn your A+ certification. And each one of those is a massive exam in itself. Just tons of information you need to know about hardware, about laptops, mobile devices, security, networking, troubleshooting all of those things together, and being able to make sure you can remember all of that. Of course, I have all of this in every single one of my videos, and you can go through all of my videos, and I highly recommend you take notes and make sure you understand exactly what you're watching in those videos. But some of you are watching other video series. I don't know why, but you do, and I guess that's fine. Some of you will show up here and say, I need a quick way to have a consolidated view of everything. I need a Cliff Notes version of everything, and I have it right here with my A+ course notes. This is what I designed to give you that last study piece before you walk into the exam. So here are the course notes on my screen right here. It's a PDF that has information on every single one of my videos. It's all indexed. It's all available. If you want to know anything about anything, you simply go here and you click on it. If you wanted to know more about some of these protocols that we were talking about, common network ports, you can click right on it. It takes you right to the page with all the common network ports and the chart that shows you all of those pieces. All of this information coming directly from all of my videos. All the charts, all the graphics, all the text, it's all in here. So it's a quick way to find all of this information in one single place. You can find out more about this at professormesser.com/1000notes. That's what is for the 220-1000 series exam. It does not cost $1,000. The 1000 notes, professormesser.com/1000notes. It's only $20 for the PDF version of that. And there's also, by the way, a physical version of that. Here's the physical book. So the digital edition is $20. You can pay a little more and get the physical edition, which is exactly the same content, by the way. There's nothing new in here. But some people like to have a physical book that has this content inside of it. And it's available there on the website. You can choose one or the other. If you do buy the physical book, I also give you the digital version for free. So you can download the digital one right now while I'm shipping this to you. Usually arrives in about a week, depending on where you happen to be in the world. Usually in the U.S., a week or less. And you'll have that physical book available that you can carry around with you and reference all this information, full color, all of the great text, details, color, everything, the images, all in one single place. And of course, every single bit of this goes back to keeping this craziness running here at Messer Studios. So you're really contributing to the success of not only you earning that exam, but the success of you allowing other people to learn this content for their exams as well. Learn more about that at professormesser.com/1000notes. Let's do another question. Let's keep moving. This question is going through and talking about a system administrator needs to connect a storage server to a 10G base T network on a switch 20 meters away. Which of the following would be the minimum category of cable needed to complete this task? Gosh, it seems like we're getting a lot of networking today. But there is a lot of networking on the exam, both on the understanding networking and the troubleshooting networking. But we're getting quite a bit on these today. A system administrator needs to connect a storage server to a 10G base T network on a switch 20 meters away. Which of the following would be the minimum category of cable needed to complete this task? You have Category 3, Category 5, Category 5E, Category 6, or Category 6A. Those are your options. Know your categories of cable. Know your cuts of meat. This is where you have to know what those differences are between those different categories. Some folks in the chat room saying you bought the PDFs, you regret not getting the physical books. There is an upgrade path, though. If you did decide you wanted the physical book, you can send me a note. Either open up a help desk ticket or send me a note from the Contact Us link on my site, and I will give you a coupon that will credit what you've already spent towards the purchase of the physical product, so you don't lose any money with that. If that's something you really, really want to do, then I want you to really, really do it. And I'll make sure that you're able to without losing any money. So a system administrator, you want to connect a storage server to a 10G base T network. That sounds pretty good. I was thinking here that I was going to buy a 10G base T network here for my studio shortly. So we may be doing that here relatively soon. And you're connecting to a switch 20 meters away, which would be the minimum category of cable needed to complete this task. And we're not sure. We're just not sure. Well, I guess if we went with the one that is not the majority, but the highest number here, it would be D, Category 6. 21% say Category 5. 17% said Category 5E. 9% said Category 3, and effectively a tie for the last one, which is 7% Category 6A. This is one of those things you do have to know on the exam when you're getting into categories of cable. In fact, some people will commonly misstate that the category of a cable runs at a particular speed, but it doesn't. The category of cable doesn't run at any speed. It's a cable. It's just a piece of copper. Doesn't run at all. There is no speed associated with cable, but the quality of the cable, how it's constructed, how many twists per inch are in the wire, those are parts of the specification that will allow a cable to run a particular type of Ethernet over it. And so it's really another step away from knowing the category of cable to being able to know what speed of Ethernet runs over that cable, because there are different flavors of Ethernet. For example, we look at the table that comes directly from my video on 221,001 section 3.1 on copper network cables. You can see that Category 3 is commonly used to support 10 base T Ethernet standard. That's a 10 megabit Ethernet standard, and his maximum supported distance on that standard is 100 meters. So that's where we get, it's really a combination of category and Ethernet standard that determines what you're able to run on that particular category of cable. Category 5, for example, which effectively these days is Category 5E. You won't find anybody selling any Category 5 any longer, but in reality, there's not physically much difference between a Category 5 and Category 5E. And if you remember that really just a minor single enhanced difference between those two, they can support both 100 base TX and 1000 base T, which is 100 megabit and 1 gigabit networking on Category 5 and Category 5E. And both of those standards go to about 100 meters because effectively those are really the same standard for all intents and purposes. Where you get into some changes, though, is when you need to go faster than 1 gig. You now need to go 10 gig. And if you're doing anything with networking these days, you're doing more 10 gig. So there are two standards of 10 gig, or two categories of cable for 10 gig that will be supporting the single 10G base T standard. Notice it's the same standard for both of those categories of cable. 10G base T running on Category 6 will get you somewhere between 37 to 55 meters in distance. Now, for Ethernet, throughout the years, we have been running Category 5 cable, really Category 5E, and it's always been this 100-meter distance. When we started putting in 10 gig traffic, 10 gig connections between these devices, we realized the category of cable we were using was not quite good enough to make it 100 meters reliably. So the one that we really want to put in if we want to go 100 meters with 10 gig would be category 6A, which has been augmented to allow that further distance with 10G base T up to 100 meters in length. And usually these days there's enough of a difference between 6 and 6A that you have to have different types of connectors sometimes. There's certainly differences in the amount of bin that you can put in the cable for the cable radius. Those types of things are important, and a lot of people just put in category 6A so that they know they can at least get 100 meters out of this. But if you're not going 100 meters, say you're going 20 meters, like the question we had today, where you're connecting a storage server to a 10G base T network on a switch 20 meters away, well, then the minimum category of cable needed to complete that task would indeed be category 6. 50% of you said it would be category 6 to be able to do that. So in the chat room, question that came up, I wonder when the industry standard will be fiber. For many people, these are fiber connections. Fiber connections are extremely common in the data center. They are not that expensive these days relative to the functionality you get for running traffic over fiber. In some environments that are highly secure, fiber is required because there are no electromagnetic impulses coming from a fiber. You would have to physically tap a fiber connection to be able to get in there to see that signal going across. And if somebody does physically tap, it's often very easy to find that happening because that would drop the dB strength quite a bit if that was to occur. Copper cables, technically, you can wrap information, you can wrap your receiver around the cable and hear what's going on inside of the cable because of the electromagnetic signals that are going through there. There's nowhere to block them as they're going through. So you do find that happening as well. The thing that you need to watch for as you're putting in cables is really distance. That's where you would go there. And fiber is another common way to do this. The switch that I'm planning to get, in fact, that is able to support 10 gig has SFPs in it. These are the modules that you're able to, the modular connectors, the PHYs, the physical connections that you're able to plug in and out of the switch. So some of the interfaces could be copper, some of the interfaces could be fiber. And then you can mix different kinds of fiber. Is it single mode fiber or is it multi-mode fiber? What type of single mode? What type of multi-mode? When you get into that particular world, now you have to ask a lot of questions to be able to do that. But for those of you that did answer this question for category 6, yeah, 20 meters, very easy to do category 6. Let's shift gears a bit and get away from networking finally, shall we? Let's do a question that's a little bit more related to the 220.1001. Up to this point, all the questions really have been both 901 and 1001 type questions. Let's do a question that is decidedly a 1001 question. So this would be brand new really for everybody. And here's the question. And it asks, an insurance company has built a cloud infrastructure in their data center using hardware purchased from a third party. Which of these would best describe this cloud deployment? Would it be public, private, hybrid, community, or hosted? Those are your 5 options. An insurance company has built a cloud infrastructure in their data center using hardware purchased from a third party. Which of these would best describe this cloud deployment? Would it be public, private, hybrid, community, or hosted? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. You can answer that one. You do not want to put any hints in the chat room. Do not put any answers in the chat room. Chat room, John asks, where does he get his practice tests from? Where I write them. That's where they come from. They come from my brain. Every question you will ever see in Twitter, every question you ever see in my books, every question you ever see in my study groups is originally written by myself. My practice questions don't come from anybody but me. So I know if the questions are good or not. When you find a question that's a real stinker, you know who to blame. I try not to do a lot of those. I try to make my questions very specific. There's a path you have to go down. There's a number of things you have to know. Very few of my questions are simple definition questions. They all have you work through a question, work through a problem, or work through a challenge to get to the final question, which, by the way, is very similar to the exam that you will run into as well. Cloud-based networking, cloud computing. There's a number of cloud computing topics that have been added to the 221,001 exam. There was a big touting of cloud computing being added to the exam. There's not a lot about cloud computing that was added, but the problem with cloud computing, of course, it's a technology that's been around, what, 5 years, 7 years? I mean, it's been around longer, but really in mainstream. We started doing things with cloud computing about 5 or 6 years ago. I mean, really rolling it out. And we're really just now getting to the point where we're starting to take advantage of some real interesting technologies with the cloud. Containerization has suddenly become popular. Those were technologies we didn't have 5 years ago. So it's a brand new thing. Everybody's learning containerization. This is what I try to tell people when they get into IT. You're going to be learning these things, but you're going to be learning your entire career. What you learn today will help you learn the next thing you need to know. But there will be things coming years from now, 3 to 5 years from now, a whole new set of technologies will show up that nobody knows about. And you're the one who has to know it. So this is the advantage, I think, of IT, is because it's always changing. You always have a job. You always have something you can do. Yeah, Kubernetes and Docker, and there's cool stuff out there that you can do with cloud computing. And it's all brand new stuff, relatively speaking. Pretty exciting things, too. And if you're someone who's been working with cloud computing, pretty darn interesting and useful as well. Not just interesting, but very useful to be able to take advantage of what the cloud can really bring. It says a lot of people outside the purview of the cloud kind of laugh at it and go, it's just a server. There's not a cloud. It's not real. Yeah, we know it's a server. We're aware of this. It's what it does for you that's the real difference. Let's see what this does for you. An insurance companies build a cloud infrastructure in their data center using hardware purchased from a third party. Which of these would best describe this cloud deployment? We don't know. If we had to choose, we've got 3 that we've chosen from. 39% of you said private. 31% of you said hosted. 22% of you said hybrid. And 4% said public and 4% said community. So if we had to go with maybe the most popular answer, we would go with the 40% of you that said private. It's just that 31% of you said hosted right behind it. And hybrid right there too at 22%. So if we had to choose between private, hosted, and hybrid, which one would it be? Let's step through these models real quick. Be good to go through these really quick. If you have your own data center, you bought your own equipment, and you're the only one using this cloud infrastructure, it's a private cloud. That's all yours. You spent the money. You've got these big servers. You've got tons of storage, and you're starting to build out and use these containerizations, virtualizations, automation, and orchestration that comes with a cloud deployment. And if it's all you, it's private. If you're using somebody else's cloud, like Amazon, like Microsoft Azure, you're using those, then it's a public cloud. Anyone would be able to access that if they had the proper credentials and the proper connections, and it's something that's owned, run, and managed by a third party. It's just out there. It's public cloud for all of those. A hybrid cloud would be a mix. Many companies do this. They have a grouping of technologies in their data center that is the private part of their doing on the cloud, but they got some applications that run on the public cloud as well. They got some applications running on Amazon Web Services. They got applications that are running out there on Microsoft Azure, and that would be a hybrid cloud to be able to see those. There are also community clouds. Let's see, everybody gets together. These are all different companies, different organizations. They all put money into a pot, and they build their own cloud. And then they're all able to access that cloud. You don't see that a lot, but there are situations where community cloud is something that does make sense. So whenever you start looking at this, and the answer is here, this is one where an insurance company has built a cloud infrastructure from their data center using hardware purchased from a third party. That's sort of a redundant statement, isn't it? If you purchased hardware, yeah, you probably purchased it from a third party. That was an intentional curveball sent your way. Of course, you're going to purchase it from a third party, but where you buy your hardware from has nothing to do with how you implement your cloud. Everybody buys their hardware from a third party, unless, of course, you make your own hardware. Not a lot of people doing that one. Which of these best describe this cloud deployment? That means all the hardware is yours. You bought it. All the storage is yours. You bought it. All the servers are yours. You bought them. All the software is running in your cloud. That is yours. You bought it. It's yours. It is the private cloud. If you answered B, private, 40% of you got that one absolutely correct. That is what this is. It's a private cloud. It's all yours. Nobody else has access. You're not accessing it from somewhere else. It's all yours. It's a private cloud. That is the correct answer. If you've been watching this and you'd like to get continuing education unit credits for this, and you would like to receive a digitally signed email from me that has a notice that you must have watched this, then you can go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There's a Contact Us link there. It will ask you for a subject that you will need to put in this Contact Us to me, which is really Contact Me. That's where all these are going to. The Contact Me means that you will be able to put in that subject line this is the May 2019 220 1001 A+ study group, and the super secret code word this month is public. See, I shifted it there. It's not what you thought it was going to be. It's public. It's the public cloud is going to be our code word of the month. This is also one that in there, it will ask you for your name and your email. Make sure you put those, because I put your name and I put your name in the digitally signed email. And of course, I need to email this back to you, so it's useful if I have the email so I can email it back to you. See how that works? And of course, there's a note. You can put notes and other comments in there as well. I'm the one reading these, so if you want to put a note to me, you can put anything in there as well. If you just want to throw me the email, you don't have to put anything in there. You don't have to put anything. Just put that super secret code word of public into that. Then I'll know you must have watched this part of the study group. You made it all the way through the hour to see all of these things and have this happen. So that's the best way to receive a digitally signed email from me. I usually takes about a week or so to get these back to you, so you don't have to send one every day wondering what happened to me. I get to it as quickly as I can, and sometimes that quickly as I can takes a week or so. So don't worry, I will get them back to you. Thank you for sending them as well. Glad to do it. We've got a couple minutes left. Let's get another question in. Let's slide another one in. We're going to go into overtime, I think, with these questions, but why wouldn't we? Let's do this. One more question. Somebody else out here wanted to have a Mac question in the chat room. I got your Mac question. Here's your Mac question that asks, a system administrator is experiencing a spinning weight cursor on their Mac OS desktop when starting an image editing application. Which of the following would be the most likely cause of this issue? Would it be a faulty storage drive? Would it be a bad video display? Would it be an invalid BIOS setting? Would it be a bad capacitor, or would it be a duplex mismatch? A system administrator is experiencing a spinning weight cursor on their Mac OS desktop when starting an image editing application. Which of the following would be the most likely cause of this issue? Is it a faulty storage drive, a bad video display, an invalid BIOS setting, a bad capacitor, or a duplex mismatch? Those are your 5 settings. See if you can troubleshoot your Mac OS desktop. A lot of you haven't touched the Mac OS, you're saying in the chat room. Some of you have a Mac OS device and you've not touched it. You will find plenty of Mac questions on the A+ exam, plenty of Linux questions on the A+ exam, along with plenty of Windows questions as well. Windows is the primary and predominant operating system on the exam, but you got plenty of Linux and plenty of Mac OS as well. It would behoove you to be more familiar with those operating systems, not just for the exam, but these are the operating systems we use out in the world, as we say. So make sure you're aware of those. People in the chat room now get to fight about how expensive Macs are, which was not the question. And quite honestly, not that actual. They're not that expensive. Like I think people think they're expensive because they're just so darn good, and they think they must be incredibly expensive because of so powerful they are. That should irritate some folks. That should get those cards and letters going. So that's the way to do it. Make sure you go through these pieces. The instructions for receiving the CEU were given a few minutes ago. So that would be your best way to rewind once this is over and have a listen. And you'll know exactly how to do that. A lot of Macs there. Underpowered and overpriced. There you go, people. Of course, all of you may not be aware that everything that you're seeing, every part of my website that you've gone to, and every video you've ever watched have been produced on a Mac. So You can talk to me about how awful and overpriced and how they just don't work very well. But I've got some proof that they actually work pretty darn well. And it's what's in front of you. So that's one. I think that, and from a security perspective, as someone who was a systems engineer, a senior systems engineer for a next generation firewall company for years and years and years and years and years and years, we all carried Mac OS. Just an incredibly powerful operating system, remarkably secure, and allowed us to do everything we needed to do and then some. So very useful to have that there. So we'll have to figure out those details as we go through this. Getting all the pieces. System administrator experiencing a spinning weight cursor is a very common problem that you would run into when troubleshooting Mac OS. So make sure you go through this and understand it. As we go through, let's see how you understood it. Well, 63% of you said, oh, that's a faulty storage drive. 15% said, no, it's a bad video display. And 14%, almost identical, said that is a duplex mismatch. 5%, single digits, said bad capacitor, and 4% said it is an invalid BIOS setting. This is very often called the spinning ball of death that just spins around on the screen. Spin, spin, spin. You used to have a cursor. There used to be an arrow there, and the arrow turns into this spinning ball and spins around on your screen. It's to give you feedback that something's happening, very similar to something like, not exactly, but very similar to the hourglass that you might get in Windows. These days, it's more of a spinning circle, it seems. But it's something that lets you know that something else is going on, and it doesn't want to quite give you access back to the operating system right now. If it's just spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning and never stops, well, that's a little bit of a problem. If you never regain access to the operating system, it becomes a little bit difficult to work with your computer. But sometimes these problems do occur. Just because it's Mac OS doesn't mean that it is impervious to hardware issues and badly written software, just like any other operating system. It could be a bug in the application. It could be bad hardware. Maybe it's something slow as it's loading up from disk. It takes a long time, and it will not allow you to regain access to the operating system until it's loaded that information. That's the way to do it. That's one of the reasons that spinning ball will occur. If it just spins and spins and spins and never stops, well, then you may have to restart the system, power it down, restart, and have a look at your error logs. Occasionally, though, if you're starting out of an application, there will be an intermittent spinning. And then once the application starts up, you will be able to suddenly have access again. It will regain access to the operating system, and everything will be fine. So the real question here, as we step through this, because people are wondering about the wording of this question, and is this really telling the right question for the answer that's received here? A system administrator is experiencing a spinning weight cursor on the Mac OS desktop when starting an image editing application. Question in the chat room, well, does it stop? Does it keep going? Doesn't matter. That wasn't the question. Focus. I need you to focus. Very often these questions will not give you a lot of detail, and this is another good example of that, where they're giving you just enough information to be able to do the troubleshooting that you need to do. In fact, if anything on the exam, they could probably give you a lot more content on here. I try to keep it short because this is a study group. Which of the following would be the most likely cause of this issue? A spinning weight cursor only has a certain number of things it could be. And in this particular question, the only one of these that it could be is a faulty storage drive, 65%. If it was a bad video display, you wouldn't be seeing the spinning weight cursor. It would be a bad video display. You wouldn't see anything happening there with those things. So that would not be it. An invalid BIOS setting, well, if that was the case, your system would have much more problems than just the spinning weight cursor. The invalid BIOS setting would have nothing to do with getting a weight cursor while you were starting an application. A bad capacitor, technically, this would be a good opportunity to have a spinning weight cursor, especially if it's something on the motherboard. It would be permanent, and it would probably manifest itself as something that was happening randomly or happening the instant you start up your computer. This particular question said you only got the spinning weight cursor when you started an image editing application. So we know that's probably related to that application. And in this particular case, a duplex mismatch is a networking issue. It would certainly slow down your network communication, but it would not cause a spinning weight cursor to appear on your screen. Faulty storage drive, as we were waiting for content to go from the drive, especially if we had to retry access to the drive, that is a very good situation where spinning weight cursor could occur. And there may be a bad section of the drive, especially where that application happens to be stored. And so you should be able to see this. This one really is a process of elimination, is what people are saying in the chat room right now, because none of these others really apply towards a spinning weight cursor. The only one left is A, your faulty storage drive. 66% of you said indeed, yep, that is exactly what it is, a faulty storage drive. And you would be absolutely correct. That is the reason that you would get a spinning weight cursor inside of Mac OS. All of these questions today came directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. I've mentioned them a number of times. They are available at professormesser.com/objectives. That will redirect you over to the CompTIA website. You could, of course, just as easily Google for CompTIA exam objectives and see that as well. They make a great checklist, by the way, for folks that are just starting their studies or you're trying to determine, have I studied everything? This is what you should use as your checklist. Everything's there inside of those 220-1001 exam objectives. So make sure you are aware of those. We do a study group for the 220-1001 every month. We have another study group available coming up on June 11th for the 220-1001. We also have 220-1002 study groups that we do. The next one will be in 2 days on May the 9th, and we'll also do one in June on June the 13th. Notice this is a little different, by the way, than some of the months we've done previously. We usually will do our A+ study group on the first Tuesday and Thursday of the month, which next month will be the 4th and the 6th. However, you'll notice that's actually going to be the 11th and the 13th, pushing it back a month there. And next month, for those of you wondering, we're actually going to do the Security Plus study group, the Network Plus study group on the 25th, and the Security Plus study group on the 27th. We're kind of doubling up, better way, with those. For those of you that would like to be able to see when the next event is going to be, you can always go to professormesser.com/calendar. And by the way, for those in the chat room asking if you can sync calendars, links are there to the Google Calendar for that. That will add it to your Google Calendar as well. So that's another way to do it. I keep that Google Calendar updated the instant that I schedule these, so you'll always know in your Google Calendar when that's going to be. The link is available for you in professormesser.com/calendar. It's the best way to do it. So make sure you have a look at those as well. Plenty to look through. Well, stick around for the next hour. We got plenty of questions. I'm just going to open up phone lines. We'll take questions from the chat room and make those available. So be sure to have a look at what we're going to do in the next hour. A lot of you like to call in or listen in. We'd like to have you here doing that as well. We have a daily pop quiz question available on Twitter. You can subscribe to my Twitter feed at professormesser.com/Twitter. All of the 1001 videos are available for you to watch right now, and new 1002 videos are being introduced all the time. I uploaded 4 new videos yesterday. And if you want to find out when that happens, you can go to professormesser.com/YouTube and make that happen as well. We've got A+ course notes available at professormesser.com/1000notes. And check the calendar. If you're watching this or listening in and you're way past the month of May, way past June, you want to know when the next event's going to be, one great way to do it is from professormesser.com/calendar. Thanks for being here. Could not do it without you. This is one of those things that relies on you to be able to answer these questions, and we're so glad you're able to join us. Thanks for being here. We will see you next time on the A+ Study Group. Well, let's see if we can get some things going with phone lines. That's our next piece on the agenda, is to get those phone lines going. So let's do that. There's a few things I have to do on my side to make that happen. And then I'll take any questions you have in the chat room. Some of you have put some good ones in there. We can always go back and look at some of those. Or if you have questions going forward, we can do that as well. Let me first get the phone lines up and running, and then I'll tell you how you could call in if you really, really wanted to. Or you can, of course, as I mentioned, ask some questions in the chat room. I'm watching the chat room go by. I'll be glad to answer questions from the chat. No problem. Let me first get dialed in myself and be able to get those in the view. Let's see if I can find all the things I need to do. I'm going to call in with my Skype to call in to my own phone lines. How does that work? What's cloud-based systems? These clouds, they're everywhere. to be able to do
show
this.
number and press pound.
Well, I will do that. I will put in my super secret numbers and press pound.
Enter your 60.
And let's see if I can remember my PIN number. It asks, which seems redundant, but I'm going to put it in anyway, and it says,
host.
all right, I am in as the host. I can do this. This works perfectly. To be able to join us on the phone lines from anywhere in the continental United States, it's a toll-free number, 855-785-RJ45. Get you to the phone lines where you will be put into a queue, and then I'll just be able to pull you up from that queue as we go. That number again is 855-785-7545. There's also free access to these phone lines from anywhere in the world. You can connect with Skype. It's a good example because no Skype minutes are required if you are calling a toll-free number. I pick up the cost by putting a +1 at the beginning and then putting 855-785-7545. You can also connect to be able to do that. So plenty to do with these. Make sure you have a listen in for some of these things as we go through. It'll tell you exactly what you need to do. Usually just call in and wait. You'll hear a beep whenever I pick up the phone line and be able to do that. So feel free to give us a ring and make that happen. Questions in the chat room before we go to the phone calls. What do I need to build a home lab for CompTIA A+? Well, that's the question. So I think you're asking, you want to build up a home lab. What will that look like? Hey, settle. You're going to be fine. Just relax. We'll be able to make this happen for you. Home labs are pretty much required. I recommend that you do plenty of book reading, plenty of video watching, plenty of Q&A, and get plenty of hands-on. So for the hands-on piece, you need to be able to have something available to do this. Now, fortunately for the A+, a lot of these deal with the Windows operating system. So being able to run Windows and Linux on your system is really some of the bare minimum that you can use to get started. A very good example of this is to use a virtualization program like VirtualBox. That's one that's absolutely free to download for Mac OS, for Linux, for any of those things are available. For Mac, Linux, Mac OS, and Windows, you can get VirtualBox, and Microsoft makes available on their website free VMs that you can download for Windows 7, Windows 8, and Windows 10 for free. How do you like that? That's what you should think about doing, is getting those free downloads. Those are available right here at modern.ie, M-O-D-E-R-N, modern.ie. There is, this is a developer site for Microsoft Edge, and under the Tools pull-down menu is an option for virtual machines where you can download Windows 7, Windows 8.1, and Windows 10. They're all right there. And you can download them. Let's say we want to download Windows 10. You can download them in VirtualBox, Vagrant, VMware, Hyper-V, or Parallels formats ready to go. So very, very simple. As long as you're using these VMs as in a developer's mode, you're not using these for production use, absolutely valid, absolutely free to use. Very, very easy to have that available. So that's the way to go through and get some free VMs. That's a great way to set up a lab if you're planning to set it up and have that there. And it's a great way to get started. From there, I think you're good. There's not much more you need in a lab for the 220.901, 902, or 1001 and 1002. To have that there, really don't need much more than that. You're really ready to go. You don't need hardware. You don't need an extra computer. You don't need a server. You don't need a router. You don't need networks for the A+ exams. You're fine there to have that there. Let's go to the phone lines. Our first phone line from my neck of the woods, the 813 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Hello, caller. You're listening. Listen into the phone lines, and you'll forget about that delay that is inevitable for there. Are you there, caller?
Hi, this is Matt from Tampa, Florida. How are you?
Hello,
Professor
Matt from Tampa, Florida. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
First of all, I want to thank you for all your help, all the resources you've provided. I really appreciate all the information.
My pleasure.
Sure. My question is that besides the notes and the videos that you provide, and of course the monthly study group, are there other resources that I should be looking into to fill any gaps that I may have that will appear on the test? I noticed that some of the information that I've studied is sort of straightforward. Some of it just requires memorization. But then when we get to the questions, some of the ones that at least you've used on the show, they require a little more thinking, a little more thought, like a little more troubleshooting. And I'm wondering if there's other resources to be able to sharpen your skills in that respect.
In fact, it's the big four that I just mentioned to that previous question that came from the chat room, which was, what do I need to really, really have all the proper things to be able to study appropriately for this exam? Not everybody has every single one of these resources, so I'm not saying that all of these are required, and I'm not saying that all of these will guarantee that you pass the exam, but this will set you up for the best possible result on the exam. The first one is get a good book. I don't write books. You have to go to an author who writes textbooks to be able to get those books. But these days, especially on Amazon, there are plenty of options available for both the 900 and the 1000 series exams. There are books available that you can have in a couple of days that would give you the information you need to go through in a textbook format. Textbooks teach information in a different way than videos teach information. So it's important that you're able to learn it in different ways, because it's going to get into your brain in different ways. The other thing I recommend people do is watch videos, because videos teach you in a way that a book can't. And you're kind of using both parts of your brain to be able to make some of those things happen. The other one that you'll think about is being able to get things like Q&A, which quite honestly, not a lot of Q&A available right now on the internet for the 1000 series, but plenty for the 900 series. And that's the place where you will start to see some of the questions that are a lot like you were just mentioning, that these are not definition questions. They're not asking you, what does SNMP mean? What does that stand for? You'll never get a question that asks you, what does SNMP stand for? What it will ask you is, how do you use it? How do you implement this technology? How is it used in the infrastructure? What are the things you need to look for? And that's one of the things I think people sometimes get mistaken on. They think the exam is a trivia exam. And in fact, they get very angry during their studies that I'm having to learn a lot of trivia. And I say, if you're learning a lot of trivia, you're not learning the right things, because there is a lot that you have to know about USB and how you would use it and what plugs into it. What about Ethernet? How is it used? What plugs into it? Why would I choose category 5 over category 6A? Those are the questions that the exam is going to ask you about, and those are the things you need. Those are the things I think Q&A does for you, is get your brain thinking, how do I take the information I've learned and somehow get it out and use it in a practical way? And I think a good set of Q&A questions does that for you. And lastly is the practical hands-on. Being able to touch the operating system, use the operating system, mouse around the operating system, click on things, troubleshoot with the operating system. Those are things that help you learn in a way that none of those other resources can. I call that muscle memory, because you're actually physically interacting with the device, and you get to a point where somehow that keystroke or mouse movement gets translated into something in your brain that you're then able to remember much better. It fires that synapse and locks it in place. Something happens there. And I think that's another important aspect of doing it as well. Get all four of those things, and you will be well on your way to passing the exam.
Great. I really appreciate the answer. Thank you so much, Professor.
Thanks, Matt. Best of luck. That's whenever you start going into, I don't know, you get into trying to find the right resources, that's kind of your second step. And I like the way that Amazon gives us some options. So we're able to read through parts of the book, kind of see if the way the author writes the book makes sense for how we like to read. I like being able to get the voice of the author and their style, and then decide, okay, that's a good book for me. That's the one I'm going to get to make this happen. Back to the phone calls real quick. Let's go to the 714 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Professor. This is Eric from Orange County, California.
Welcome, Eric from OC.
Thanks. I just had a question regarding, let's say, I currently work full time, and it has nothing to do with IT. And I'm looking to, should I actually be looking to get a job in the IT industry while studying for the A plus, or should I just focus on trying to pass the test, which I already have scheduled for July for the Core One series?
Right. This is sort of an ongoing challenge most people have with certification slash an actual job and experience slash formal education. There's so many different combinations you can put together to get to where you want to go. And I think that's usually where I would stop and take a step back and say, you're wanting to get this job, you're wanting to have this certification in your pocket, but the real question is, what are you wanting to do? Is there a particular goal in mind that you're working towards?
Well, for now, it's just trying to get the certification by the end of the year. But from what I've been told is that getting the hands-on experience is going to benefit me, or once I get my certification, because it's a little more difficult to get a job once you get your certification if you have no experience, no hands-on.
This is whenever you're getting a job, there's four things employers are really looking for. Four different categories, very broadly speaking, is employers would love to see experience. This is something that not everybody has, even at higher levels of IT. If you're hiring for someone that is very specific to a network like a systems engineer position that I used to have, it might be that they're looking for somebody who has a specific set of experiences in the security world versus the operating system world. The same thing happens for entry-level positions. Some employers would like somebody who has some practical experience. Some employers would prefer to hire people who have no experience because they generally cost less. There's a business reason for hiring people with no experience, and then they will train you as you go. So it just depends on the employer. The other piece is people would like to be able to see some formal education. Do you have an AA degree? Do you have a 4-year degree? Did you get a technical degree? Where is this degree from? That's one that a lot of people think about having and putting into the combination, the mix that is the recipe that creates this offering that you make for a potential employer. The third might be some certifications. So if you're getting a job in IT, having some IT certifications may or may not be able to provide you with some value when you're walking into the interview room. It again depends on the employer. None of these things are guaranteed, and employers are looking for different combinations of a lot of different things. So that's the thing you have to think about when you're getting into this is what are the combinations of things that I can provide? Sometimes if you don't have formal education, then you might want more certifications. Sometimes if you have a formal education, maybe certifications aren't as important. And unfortunately, it's hard to get into the brain of the hiring manager to know where their emphasis is and how they do this. The fourth thing that I always mention when you're trying to get hired, we always think about having that experience, the formal education, and the certification. And the last thing is who you know. The last thing is who you may already be familiar with, who might already work in that company. Because companies like to hire people they can trust. And they like to hire people they know, even if the person they know is 1 or 2 different levels away from you. So this is one where you looked at your different LinkedIn and how far away a person is from you. This becomes pretty important. I tell people all the time that I had about 15 different positions in IT through the years. Sometimes those positions I moved within the same company. Sometimes I moved outside of that company. But I had about 15 different positions in IT during my formal IT career when I was working for someone else. And my very first job I got with a college degree, no certifications, and not knowing anybody who worked there. I just happened to be, I guess, at the right place at the right time. And they hired me thinking, we're going to send him all over the place. It's grunt work. We'll take it. He knows nothing. It's perfect for this job. And they hired me. But every job I got after that, I knew somebody who worked there. So that was the part that, as I look back on this, it's kind of surprising to me how well that worked. Because sometimes the people that work there weren't in the IT department. Sometimes they were in the IT department. Sometimes they were in a different department of where I would be working, or sometimes they were in the exact department where I would be getting a job. But that is something you don't want to miss either. So I often tell people, go to a Microsoft user group meeting in your area, go to a Cisco user group meeting in your area, go to a technology get-together in your area, and then meet the people there. Don't just go and eat pizza. You're going there to meet those people, to get on their LinkedIn, to find out where they work, to find out and ask the question of them. I just got my college degree. I'm looking for a job in a help desk or an entry-level position somewhere. What does your company look for in a help desk hire? What do they look for in that entry-level position? And have them tell you what they're looking for. That may tell you exactly where you need to go as far as certifications are involved. They may say, oh, don't even come in the door unless you have an A+. Or they'll tell you, just come in the door. We will train you. We will get you your A+, and then we'll move you into desktop management, server management, network management, whatever your next steps are and what you want to do. So it really is going to depend wildly on what the employer is looking for. So if you're trying to figure out, do I do the A+ now? Do I do it later? The mix of what you create is only stronger if you have it in your pocket. So sometimes it's useful to have that A+ already taken care of, and when you walk in the door, you're ready to go. And if an employer doesn't care about it, well, there's nothing lost there other than you have the certification and they just don't care. But you have the certification and you learned what the certification taught you. So when you walk in the door for that particular company, you can ask for a little more money because you're a little more knowledgeable. And hopefully the company then would be getting a little more value by you being there. That's the whole combination. That's the punch you're really looking for when you walk in the door. So hopefully that can give you some ideas of, or some insight into where I would go if I were you, to be able to put together this criteria that you can now add to your resume when you're ready to hand it to someone.
Okay, yeah. Okay, because I've been looking at posts online, and they pretty much ask for an arm and a leg, like maybe 2-3 years of experience for an entry level or even a help desk, which is kind of overwhelming since I'm just trying to get in right now.
And my advice to you when you see a job posting like that is to completely ignore that nonsense they put into the posting. We need an entry-level help desk person that has 5 years of Microsoft Azure experience. They've been able to take apart a Cisco router and put it back together again, and they're able to code Microsoft Windows applications with a blindfold. These are ridiculous job postings that they have out there, but they're written by somebody who has no idea about technology. Every time you see a job posting like that, it is something that they've borrowed from someone else. They got into a committee. There's a room full of people in IT, and they say, hey, what types of things would you like to see in a new hire? And they go, oh, I'd love somebody who had 5 years of Azure. I'd love somebody who could program with a blindfold. And then stick it. Well, okay, we'll stick it in there. Let's see if we can find somebody. My recommendation when you see those types of job postings is you already recognize that it's ridiculous, which is great. You're already further along than you should be. My recommendation is to send your resume in, because the resumes are going to get to somebody who now has to go through them to be able to figure out who they want to hire. And they're going to be looking at relative availability of skills than everybody else in the industry. So nobody has the skills I just mentioned. There's some of these job descriptions, nobody exists in the world with those job description listings. There's nobody you can find. And if you did find somebody, they want so much money, it would not be an entry-level position. Just send in your resume. Ignore the craziness. Send in your resume. Will something come of that? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe they've set their filters so high that they get absolutely no response the first time they put this out there. But make a note on whatever you're keeping notes on to come back to that in a month, to come back to that in 2 weeks. Just every 2 weeks, check in, see what's happening with that job posting. And it's remarkable how many times the job postings suddenly get tweaked a little bit so that, all right, you don't need a blindfold anymore. And then suddenly it turns into, okay, you don't need to know how to program Windows apps. And then it turns into, okay, you don't have to disassemble a Cisco router. Sometimes they do properly fix those things. Other times they don't. If you see one that's completely off scope and you don't recognize the company and it's a completely weird thing, the process of getting a job these days, entry level, is frightening and in some cases predatory. People are out there trying to take advantage of you and trying to take money away from you to be able to get a job in IT. There's never a case in IT where you would need to put out any type of money or any type of your resources in order to get an interview with someone. There's a lot of people trying to take advantage of others in this industry. And some of these job postings are people trying to do exactly that. You have to become very savvy at this. It's a game, and it's one you have to become very good at to be able to get there. As soon as you can get through the gauntlet that is this game and get in a room sitting with somebody, that's when it really starts. None of this before that point really matters. It's once you get in the room or you get on the phone or you get on a Skype with somebody and can talk to them or see them or communicate with them, that's when all of the things you've been working on should gel together and present to them a very compelling reason why they should hire you. Up to that point, there's a lot of games you have to play with it. And it's a skill set I don't talk about a lot on my site because it is so specific. But there are plenty of sites and plenty of YouTube channels out there that can talk to you about optimizing the process and going through the interviewing process. It's not an easy process, but it's one you do need to be familiar with. Don't go into it not familiar with how the game is played because you will get ripped up pretty quick and thrown out. You need to be in the best possible position when you're putting those resumes out there. I kind of went on a little long about that, but when has that been new with me? Hopefully that's helped.
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much, Professor.
Absolutely. I appreciate you calling. Best of luck, Eric.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
I could not imagine going through this process today. It was hard enough interviewing. I had a college degree in business management, and I interviewed with some big companies who had come to the university. They do a job fair. They have people come in every week. You sign up for an interview. You walk in with them. You talk to them about what you know. And it became very depressing because you'd walk in and they'd say, well, what's your GPA? I said, well, my GPA is this, which is not great. But I did have a part-time job through college. I worked with supercomputers. I worked with the fastest supercomputer in the world. I did this or with that. Like, we really are more interested in your GPA. And unless your GPA is better, I don't see how we can really be interested. And then you go to the next thing. And I'm thinking, if you're only evaluating people on GPA, you're going to miss something. And they know that. Of course they know that. But in their minds, they got rid of a lot of things when they just went with GPA. You're going to find a lot of employers that do that. So don't get dismayed. Don't get depressed about it. Just keep going. It's one of those things where it's completely depressing until you actually get that job. And then suddenly, oh, well, this is great. Suddenly all of that fades away. So don't worry about some of those things as you get to them. Let's go back to the queue. Let's go 719. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello, Professor Messer. This is Chuck from Colorado.
Hey, Chuck.
Just
Thanks for
wanted
calling.
to say thank you. And you bet. Just wanted to say thanks. I passed my Security Plus. It was a pretty tough test.
Nice.
Didn't do as well as I'd hoped, but I did get it. And I'm listening to a lot of your people here, and they're I've been in customer support, which is basically the tip of the spear. You learn a lot there. It's usually the first place you're going to go when you're going to get into tech, and there's a lot of different avenues for this kind of thing. So you need to be kind of picky about one, but be kind of a shade tree of the others. Another thing for anybody that's looking for the Security Plus, just kind of throwing this out there. It's hard when you don't code in that kind of thing. And there's an old book by a guy named Jonathan Knudsen. It's called Java Cryptology. It's old. It uses old classes. but you can then, create hashes and things like that. And that might help you to understand what the questions are on the test. If you want to take a look at that, you might be able to find it out there. But again, thank you so much for all that you do. And you really helped me get through that Security Plus.
That's great,
Really
Chuck.
appreciate it.
Congratulations. That is a very, very difficult exam. I think some people don't realize just how hard that exam is going in. And to be able to go through that particular exam and get through it is a huge accomplishment. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Let's get back to the queue. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. That is one challenge I think a lot of people have with Security Plus is that in some cases, in fact, in many cases on my site, people are taking Security Plus as the first exam they ever take in IT, which is a daunting undertaking. It is a difficult exam for security professionals, much less, or even IT professionals, much less someone who's just getting into it. So it takes so much study to be able to earn that Security Plus. So well done. And you're right, although there is not a programming aspect to Security Plus, because programming and really computer science and information technology are really two different worlds that sometimes get lumped together, but they really are very, very separate. That being able to, in some way, find a way to practically create or understand hashing can be a challenge. And whether you're creating the hash programmatically, you're creating the hash by building out your own PGP application and creating your own keys and creating your own digital signatures and creating your own hashes, those are things that's useful as well. That is, whenever I start getting into the details of these technologies, finding a way to make that fourth piece, which was the hands-on, the practical experience piece, find whatever way you can to be able to do that. Because once you do it, like Chuck was saying, it kind of, that synapse fires, that you're suddenly now able to understand, oh, that's what it does. Now I understand the question. That makes it so much better whenever you go through those paths and making that happen. Let's go to another call, 276. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Professor. My name is Mohammed, calling from Virginia.
Thanks for calling. What's your question?
So I have about 5 years of help desk experience, and my company, they want just Security Plus and Network Plus. So I know CompTIA advises to go A Plus, and then it's Network Plus, Security Plus. I have a question on that. What would you recommend as far as getting the first certification? And I am working on 1001 series right now. I'm on your third section or chat. Yeah. So just want to get your point of view on that. I love your videos, learning a lot on those, and want to get your recommendation, please.
I appreciate that. There is a very interesting, what IT calls it, or CompTIA calls an IT certification roadmap on their website. And it's a PDF. You can find it by Googling the IT certification roadmap. It's sort of involved because it shows certifications from different organizations, not just CompTIA, but Cisco, Adobe, Aruba, EC Council, IDLE, Linux Professional Institute, Salesforce. They got tons of certifications on here. In fact, it's a little overwhelming for someone who's not at all familiar with certifications here. And most people will find that that CompTIA puts the beginner/novice in A+. They put the intermediate in Network Plus and Security Plus. So you're building up from there. And in fact, if you looked at the series of exams and which exam comes first and which comes second and which comes third, as you mentioned, CompTIA says you do A+, you do Network Plus, then you do Security Plus. But as I mentioned to you, and especially considering your particular geography, a lot of people in Virginia and D.C. start with the Security Plus because they're doing work with the United States Department of Defense, and that particular certification is the bare minimum you need to be able to get an IT job working with Department of Defense. So they don't even look at Network Plus. They don't even look at A+, because those don't do them any good. Even though there is some building of concepts as you move from one to the other, you can very easily start with any of those three, depending on what your goals are. I'll take me as an example. I was working for a long time started with Network General and was bought by McAfee, which became at the time Network Associates. So I was working with firewalls, antivirus in the enterprise, network management and troubleshooting, and help desk software. It was a broad scope of technologies that we were working with, but a huge part of that was the McAfee side and working with firewalls, intrusion prevention, and antivirus. And I thought, I don't have my A+, I don't have my Network Plus or Security Plus. So what I did, the first certification I got was Security Plus, because Network Plus wasn't going to help me and A+ wasn't going to help me. I wanted to show my employer I was really wanting to be more familiar with the technologies associated with this, because I was part of the purchase from Network General. I knew packets, I knew protocol decodes, I knew network management and network troubleshooting. So when I was thrown into McAfee, now there's a whole security side I had to learn. So I started with Security Plus. Then I went back and got my Network Plus. And then lastly, I got A+. So I went in the reverse direction. I didn't follow the path at all. I went the wrong way. But at the time, getting the Security Plus was important. And then I wanted to create Network Plus and A+ content for the web. So we're going back now 14, 15 years when I started this craziness. That was when I started to get into those particular certifications. So my reason for going backwards is probably different than most people's reasons for going backwards, but where you start doesn't matter. The important part to know is, what am I trying to accomplish? Then pick the right certification for what you need. Some people want A+ and need A+. Some people don't need it at all, and they start on the Security Plus side. It's really up to you.
Right, like you stated, DC area, man, they don't even want to give you security clearance without having security certification, like Security Plus. So that's one thing.
That's right.
That's kind of I'm right now. Currently, I work for two great organizations. Currently, I'm with SAIC. I worked with Northrop Grumman previously on state contract. And it's just that's the only thing. Certifications, it seems like they want either Security Plus or Network Plus. Like you stated, A+, they just don't seem to care much about. But I thank you a lot. Love your videos. I have been learning a lot from your contact. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thanks for calling. It's a very common thing I see in the DC area. I've got lots of people that get my course notes, that watch my videos, and they're in Virginia, they're in Maryland, they're in DC. And it's the exact same situation you mentioned, that even if you are not directly working for the Department of Defense, the company you're working for is working directly with the Department of Defense, and they want you with the same credentials that a DoD employee would have. And so starting at Security Plus, perfectly reasonable, perfectly acceptable, perfectly expected for somebody in that particular role. So I highly recommend that's the direction you go as well, if that's what you're looking to do. Why not? Yes, skip the A+, skip the Network Plus, go directly to the Security Plus, and you'll be just fine. Let's go back to the phone calls. We've got a call coming in, 832 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Yes, sir. My name is Sean. I'm calling from North Carolina.
Welcome, Sean.
And I'm currently military, looking to go civilian IT right now.
Sure.
And I'm starting off small. I guess kind of the opposite of what you were talking about earlier. Y'all were talking about tackling Sec Plus, which is my end goal. But currently, I'm just going for something simple. I'm going for A+ in order to get into WGU. And so I'm military, and I got kind of pushed into like having exact definitions of stuff. Do you have any resources I can tackle for, like, for example, I'm going over like switches and bridges and and repeaters and everything like that. And a lot of the devices are extremely similar. Do you have a resource that I can access to where I can distinguish those devices without going into like a full paragraph?
That one is a tough one. One of the problems you have when you get into the networking side of these things is that a lot of the textbooks that you will find will be very solid on the A+ hardware, mobile device, and troubleshooting side. But the networking piece is a different science unto itself. And a lot of these technologies they talk about in A+ and Network+, like bridges, switches, repeaters, and those types of things, are not commonplace. Especially bridging and repeating are not things that people run into often, and they work very differently than a router, for example. And it's difficult to explain the difference in the context of what you need to know for the A+ exam, because A+ doesn't go very deep on the networking side. A+ is really focused on how do I set up the network in Windows and on an operating system to be able to communicate with the other devices on my network. This is where you really start getting into a challenge of finding a textbook that is well written by somebody knowledgeable enough in networking to be able to break it down. And the only advice I can really give you is to check different textbooks and the information they're providing. Some of these textbooks have completely wrong info in them about networking. I get emails all the time that say, your video said one thing, but my book says something completely different. And they send me a text, a screenshot, and I go, yeah, that book is, that's wrong. That's not how networking works at all. And that's a challenge sometimes. Sometimes you will find that authors will correct some things or make it clearer in the addendums that they create to the book. So sometimes going out to the publisher's website can provide you with additional documentation that might correct or resolve conflicts within the books themselves. That may be another resource to go with. But for finding the right way to explain some of these things, it may just take different resources to be able to do that for you.
Okay, that kind of summarizes it. Then I'm sorry, just really quick follow-up question. I was kind of curious if that's such a broad topic as far as that, and harder to, I guess, nail down in the nature of, I guess, A+. What would be a proper way to sort of hone in my focus? Because right now my goal is I just need to knock out the first part of A+, and I want to make sure that I have these terms down in order to pass the test.
The A+ exam has some very specific exam objectives that will show you exactly what you need to know. And this is where I always point people back to the exam objectives. That is the best place to go. You will find that for some reason, some of these authors of these books will put information into the book that goes well outside the scope of the exam objectives. They go, in fact, farther beyond that. I can't even understand why they would do that. They just go way outside the scope. I always tell people the exams stay very, very close to the exam objectives. And if you get into a situation where you're worried that, well, this book went into this long dissertation about networking, and yet the exam objectives have none of that content in them, am I really putting myself at a disadvantage? And the answer usually is no, you're not. If you know everything in the exam objectives, you're going to do just fine on the exam. So the ultimate arbiter, I tell people, if you're looking at my videos, if you're looking at a book, if you're looking at a hands-on lab, if you go back to the exam objectives, that should be the ultimate list for you. And if it's in the exam objective, it covered on the exam. If it's not in the exam objectives, CompTIA tells you in the exam objectives, they could ask you things that aren't in this list. And that's what people will say was that, well, CompTIA could ask you something that's not there. And my answer is always, yeah, but they don't. They just don't. They stay really close to the exam objectives. So even if they happen to go way off the scope on one of those things, that's one question. As long as you know what's in the exam objectives, you're going to do fine on the exam.
Okay, I think that kind of answers everything that I needed. I really appreciate your help, sir.
Thanks, Sean. Best of luck.
Mm-hmm.
That's whenever you start getting into what's on the exam. Do I know everything I should know for the exam? What topics are the most important for the exam? Same answer. Go to the exam objectives. Have you looked at the exam objectives? Have you read through the exam objectives? Have you downloaded the exam objectives? And I know I'm just completely redundant I'm constantly harping on the exam objectives, and there's a reason for that. There have been people that have come to my site and have said, I just failed the 901 exam. I got questions on topics I was not expecting. And I don't want to ask them what those topics were because I don't want them to violate their candidate agreement for the exam. But I ask them, oh, was that topic mentioned in the exam objectives? And they always say, what exam objectives? The exam objectives are intense. They are detailed. Since we're on this topic, and there is a caller holding, so I see you there, caller. I'll be with you in just a moment because I do want to let's pull up the exam objectives for the 220-1001 exam. Just so happens to have one right here because that's what I use to build my courses. So let's look at a list of the exam objectives. I'm going to go to a 2-page view of this so we can really view it on the screen. Here it is. Let's put my head in the way. Let's show you this. There it is. So this is the exam objectives. Page 3, page 4. Mine are color-coded because I color-coded the things that were changed between the different versions of the exams and the things that weren't. I told you earlier in the study group, 20% of the exam has changed. Anytime you see yellow, that's a change. So it's in a different order, but topic-wise, those are new topics. So for a good example, like micro USB, that was in 901. Mini USB, that was in 901. USB-C, oh, that was not in 901. See how they kind of snuck the new thing in there? So I had to create new content for the USB-C. But as you're going through this, look how detailed this is. Let's take one example. So let's scroll to the next page. And it says, compare and contrast common networking hardware devices. Routers, switches, both managed and unmanaged, access points, cloud-based network controllers, firewalls, network interface cards, repeaters, hubs, cable/DSL modem, bridge, patch panel, power over Ethernet, PoE, injectors and switches, and Ethernet over power. That's what you need to know. And it's a very broad description. Compare and contrast common network hardware devices. That's all they give you, but they're not going into detail with this. They're not asking for you to configure from scratch a Cisco router. They're just asking you, hey, what's the difference between a router and a switch? What's the difference between a switch and an access point? What's the difference between an access point and a cloud-based network controller? It's very broad. So this is going to tell you exactly the things you need to know. You need to be able to say this or repeat it or explain to someone else. What is a router? How does it work? What is it looking for? Where do you find a router? Have you ever seen one? Here's one right here. Let me point at it. Let me look at the login for that. Let's get familiar with that router. Okay. How about a switch? What's that look like? Do we have one around here? Oh, there's one. What's that look like? Let's look online. Let's Google switch. Let's look at a picture of a switch. Let's see an image of where people plug in the switch. Those are the types of things that are important to know for the exam, and just goes for pages and pages and pages of this content. So lots of green here, pockets of yellow. There's a little purple here, which means they talked about it, but I need to put more information in about it. So not necessarily new, but it needed some additional building out of content. But lots of green. So that's why I mentioned earlier that if you're someone who's studied for the 901, you're probably in pretty good shape for the 1001. Go back to the exam objectives. That will give you a center. That will be, you can align your chakra from the exam objectives. You can be a vessel from the exam objectives. That's where you should go to be able to do that. That's your best place to go. Let's go back to the phones, 302 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, how are you? My name is Aaron from Delaware.
Hello, Aaron. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
Basically, I'm studying for the CompTIA 901, 902 A+. I'm actually trying to retake the test because I scored a 616, and I wanted to know what would be the best way to quickly shoot those numbers up a little bit higher so that we can go ahead and pass.
Well, one of the things,
as far as study method,
right? One of the things that is very useful, and all of us have many of us, myself included, have walked into a certification exam and failed it, and had to, walk out with my head hung low, to go back and study some more, to walk back in. One particular certification exam I took was 3 times I took that exam before I passed it. So this is sort of the common thing that you will run into with some of these exams. Some of them, for some reason, are just harder than others, and I don't know why that is. But CompTIA does give you some things that are going to help you. The first one is that the piece of paper they give you on the way out gives you an overview of what topics on the exam you did not get correct. Now, when you left the exam center, did they give you a printout of that information?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's great. I've noticed that Pearson VUE, which is the third-party company that provides the testing centers for CompTIA certifications, at least in the U.S. I think they're doing it worldwide now. I believe they are starting to put those also online. This is something relatively new. I haven't seen anybody do this yet. I'd love for somebody who has taken the exam recently. Are you able to log into your Pearson VUE account and view that piece of information? I'd love to get more details about this. But before you leave, they should print one out as well and give it to you. It used to be if you walked out of the room, you walked out of the building without that piece of paper, you were never, ever, ever going to see that piece of paper. And until I hear otherwise, that's the advice I'll give people, is make sure they have it. People will tell you, oh, our printer's not working, sorry. And you can tell them, well, you need to fix it because I'm not leaving until I get that piece of paper. I need it to be able to pass this exam next time. So I got to have that information. I need to see it. I need to take a screenshot. If you have it on the screen, let me take a screenshot with my phone. I need that information because it breaks out for you the topics from the exam objectives you got wrong, which means you can go back to the exam objectives and you could view them because it might tell you you got one wrong in section 1.2, which is given a scenario, install components within the display of a laptop. Now, that's a very broad description of what you got wrong. They didn't tell you with question that you got wrong. They didn't even tell you was the question about LCDs, OLEDs, Wi-Fi antennas, webcams, microphones, inverters, or digitizers. But if you think back to the exam you just took, you might be able to figure it out. But it at least tells you need to know more about those topics. So, okay, let me study up on those topics. Now, part of the challenge you'll run into, of course, is that doesn't mean the next time you take the exam, you're going to get the same exam again, because you're not. You're going to get a completely different exam again. And by the way, it may have no questions from section 1.2 in it. So you may end up learning all of this content from section 1.2 and then end up not using it. But that's just the way that certification exams work, and we recognize that. And what else are you going to do? But at least it gave you a direction of where you could learn more, because they certainly could ask you another question on the exam that came from section 1.2, and now you're studied up on those particular topics better than you were the first time you went in. The other thing I'll tell you is that the exam objectives are a great checklist. So even if they don't specifically list out on that piece of paper topics that you missed, it might be worthwhile to go through this list and start checking off all of these different topics that are in the list and start getting an understanding of, well, I need to check off, what do I know about keyboards? What do I know about hard drives? What is the difference between an SSD and a hybrid and a magnetic disk? What is the difference between a 1.8 inch and a 2.5 inch? Those are the things that would be useful for you to be able to drill down on and get into your head. And I find that if I explain it to someone else, it helps me learn it better. So whether you're talking to yourself in a mirror, whether you're talking to yourself just in a room, which makes you sound crazy if somebody was to walk by, or maybe there is somebody who will just put up with you talking to them and you can explain to them what you're doing. That may be another useful tool you can use. It all comes back to the exam objectives in that piece of paper. And if you can start honing in on topics where you're a little weak, or entire sections where you might need a little more help, you'll know exactly what to study for next time.
Right. Thank you so much. And again, me and everyone from the Delaware Skills Center in Delaware, we thank you so much. You've helped so much of us pass exams, and we just thank you, and we pray that you continue to keep doing what you're doing.
I hear you guys back there. Thanks, Aaron. I appreciate the call.
All right. Have a good one.
You too. That's fantastic. Good for you guys. Keep doing it. Don't quit. Take the exam again. This is the great thing about these certification exams. You don't lose anything by failing. You lose the money, I guess, you paid for the exam. So there's a financial benefit for passing, but that's it. You just take it again. It's not like you lost out on something. It's not like you're missing something. You just take the exam again. The exam I took 3 times, I think, was on network cabling. I want to say it was ATM, but I don't think that's correct. I think it was network cabling. Would you believe I had to take an exam 3 times to pass an exam on network cabling? But I did. I passed that exam on the 3rd time. Just take it again. Just keep taking the exam till you pass it. You will get better. It will get. And there are some people out there, I will tell you, you read the subreddit for CompTIA, some of these people take their exam 6, 7 times before they ever pass these exams. It's a struggle for some people. It's hard for me to take exams. I'm not a good exam taker. So other people also not good exam takers. It's a very anxious, high anxiety, difficult. When I step into an exam, the first couple of questions, I don't even know what I'm reading. It's just, I might as well be reading a different language. It's blah, blah, blah. I see the words. I can read them. I see the question. It just doesn't register in my brain. I have to settle down. I have to kind of get in the zone, and then I can take the exam. So the first 10 minutes for me, I'm just forget it. I have to go back and now correct the mistakes I made over those first 5 to 10 minutes to be able to make that happen. That's just the way it goes. And I know if for some of you, it's the exact same situation because you've told me it is, where you've had to struggle to keep up with these exams and how to make all of these things work better once you get in the exam room. There is a strategy to it. There are things you can do to make it better. And here's my tip there. When you're in the exam, take advantage of the button that allows you to flag a question. I use this extensively in an exam. I try to go through every question as fast as I can. For A+, you got 90 minutes. So after you read a question, you're looking at the question and the answers. You also have the option to flag the question. There's a little checkbox on the screen. And if you read that question, if I read it through and I answer, and I'm not 100% I got that question right, I flag it. This is my strategy. You might want to change this up for you, but this is the way I do it. I flag it. So if I'm 100% sure I knew that one and I got it right, I don't flag that question. If I'm 99% sure, so if I'm at all not sure, if there's any inkling of perhaps I did not get that one right, I flag it and go to the next one. Let's just keep it moving. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, no, that one's solid. 100%. Keep it going. I don't know this one at all. Let's take a guess and flag it. And then I get to the end. And on the end page, when you go through every question, it gives you 90 questions, gives you 91 through 90 on the page. It tells you what you answered, A, B, C, or D. On number 1, you answered D. And then it shows you if you flagged the question or not. It also shows you if you left any blank, which are also useful. So now I start going through the flagged questions one by one. And what I find is that other questions on the exam may have told me information that helps me answer earlier questions. This happens all the time on these types of exams. So the first question was about a port number. Later on, there's a firewall question that deals with port numbers, and the port number I needed is in the question. I'm like, oh, I know what that is. Let's go back to the original question and do it again. So that's one of those that does come in handy, is to use other questions in that way. And by flagging, I know I'm going through a review and checking my answers. I try to check it for all of them, but I definitely check for all the flagged ones. What I usually do second time through is I try to go, if I have the time, go through every question again, because there have been times when I have been 100% sure I got that one right, and I read the question again and realized, oh, wait, they said not in the question, and I completely missed that the first time, and that question's wrong. Let me change the answer, and let's keep going, even though I thought it was 100%. Nothing's perfect, right? There's no system that's 100% perfect. So that's what you need to think about, too, as you're going through these pieces and figuring out the details, is that nothing really is 100%, but you should have a strategy that sets you up for the best possible outcome. And that's what that is really going through and setting yourself up for a strategy that works for you. Maybe you only mark ones that you're 50% sure on. Maybe that's where you're flagging. Maybe you flag very few of them. That's up to you. And it all deals with how fast you can read through these questions, how fast you can get through the exam. It may take a couple of exams for you to find the right combination for you, but that's something you should consider as well when you're going through it. Well, we've gone through an hour of Q&A. I want to thank you for being here. We did all this out in the first hour, all the Q&A we did a whole Q&A from the chat room and from your call in. Thank you so much for that as well, for going through those pieces. We really could not do this without you. This is your study group, and we're so glad you're able to be here, answer the questions, call in, leave questions in the chat room. We thank you so much. Stop by in about 2 days on Thursday. This is Tuesday the 7th. On Thursday the 9th, we're doing another one of these at noon Eastern time for the 1002 exam. You can sign up to a notification email list from the front page of the ProfessorMesser.com website. On the right sidebar, you'll see the link to the email notifications. And that means 5 minutes before, I will send you a notification. If you subscribe to my YouTube channel, YouTube will send you a notification. And I, of course, send out a tweet and put information on Facebook as well when that happens. You'll know exactly where to go to get the information you need to participate for that study group. Thank you for being here this time. We'll look forward to seeing you in a couple days on the 1002 study group. Until then, thanks for being here. We'll see you next time on the A+ Study Group.